Yes, white supremacy. This is their big thing, white supremacy. They and everybody's a white supremacist except them. And they're the ones that exterminate 40% of the black population. You know, if the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, Democrat Party creation, came up with a plan to exterminate 40% of the black population, they couldn't do better than the Democrats have done with Planned Parenthood. Just couldn't do better. No matter how much of a schemer you might be, I don't think you could come up with anything better than that. But let's get to, because Bernie Sanders, you know, he's a socialist, a Bolshevik. He honeymooned in the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. He's that old and older, really, quite honestly. And I find something. See, here's a great one from the New York Post. Has this version of it. San Francisco teacher writes an op-ed, they love their colons. Bernie Sanders' mittens are, quote, a lesson in white privilege. I'm sorry, his mittens are a lesson in what? Because you don't have to use fingers? Is that why exactly does that represent white privilege? You might want to know. And if you do want to know, well, I can tell you. A San Francisco high school teacher, who, by the way, is a former UC Berkeley professor, must not be doing very well. I mean, that's kind of going down the slope on this one, I think. San Francisco high school teacher wrote an op-ed claiming Senator Bernie Sanders' manifest privilege, you see, for wearing his meme-evoking inauguration outfit. Ingrid Sayer-Ochi, a former UC Berkeley professor, wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle that the Vermont senator's choice of recycled wool mittens was integrated into her classroom discussion on U.S. diversity and discrimination. Initially, on Inauguration Day, the teacher, Sayer-Ochi, said her class talked about the deeper meanings of the historic day, including the vulnerability of democracy and the power of ritual and gender. Because, you got to have race, class, and gender and all things, because they're really mentally ill people, and there are millions of them. Sanders, the teacher said, was not even on their radar until he became an instant internet sensation for his mittens and brown parka. I puzzled and fumed, said, as an individual, as I strove to be my best possible teacher. What did I see? What did I think my students should see? Wealthy, incredibly well-educated and privileged white man showing up for perhaps the most important ritual of the decade in a puffy jacket and huge mittens. This is because he's a communist, all right? This has got nothing to do with his being white. This is because he's a commie. He's a leftist. Now, I agree. He was inappropriately dressed for the inauguration, maybe a nice long wool coat from Brooks Brothers or something. But he's a communist, you see. And these rag mittens he was wearing, made by some woman in Vermont, who made them out of recycled old sweaters that they found in dumpsters. I think they might be dumpster diving mitten makers. And it's a double alliterative there. And she made this nice woman. And then she was interviewed afterward, and she said, well, I stopped making them because, it wasn't worth all the energy and effort, and I could only get a few bucks for them because they're profoundly ugly. And, that's why Bernie likes him, because he's a communist. He might be colorblind, too. It could be a test of his colorblindness. But never mind all that. The senator, she said, manifests privilege, white privilege, male privilege, and class privilege in ways that my students could see and feel. Now, that she got race, class, and gender into one indictment right here, the Marxist narrative of race, class, and gender, and she built it right in there. She's got white privilege, male privilege, and of course he's, highly educated. Believe it or not, he hasn't been educated very well. She said in the op-ed that many people without privilege would not be able to dress like Sanders on such an occasion. Well, most people are not invited to the inauguration, but when you invite communists to your inauguration, you should expect a communist to show up, all right? And when communists show up, they smell like communists, they they dress like communists, because they're communists, all right? So there she is. And then people started making fun of this idiot teacher. They say, so Bernie represents the terrible privilege of the white and rich because he, doesn't wear expensive clothing. That's what one person. Apparently, it is privilege to dress comfortably and not privilege to wear expensive designer clothing. While the media talks about ensembles like it's a red carpet event. That's right. And as somebody else said, the only privilege I see here right now is the privilege of being able to publish a bad faith opinion piece in a newspaper with a paywall. And it does have a paywall. It does. These guys.
You know, in Vermont, we dress warm. We know something about the cold. We're not so concerned about good fashion. We want to keep warm.
They do in Moscow, too, which is where he really gets his fashion tip stuff, I'm telling you.